Hello everyone. Today we're going to be dealing with the components of a frequency table as well as how to calculate the mean and standard deviation of a frequency table using technology. By the end of this video, you should be able to identify the components of a frequency table, compute the relative frequency and the cumulative frequency for any given portion of a frequency table, and calculate the mean and standard deviation of a frequency table using technology, specifically the TI platform. So this is our frequency table. It came from Elementary Statistics by Mario F. Triola, the 12th edition, and you can find it on page 94. So the first thing we want to identify on a frequency table are our classes and our frequencies. So as you can see, the categories that provide a range of values in this column are known as our classes, and this column is the frequency with which each class occurs. That is to say, there are, in the first class, 4 values from our data set fall in that range. So there are some important pieces that we can dissect from this, and the first of which is the class width. Now the class width is defined as the difference between 2 consecutive lower class limits or upper class limits. So in this case, we have 2 lower class limits in our first 2 classes, which are 50 and 60. So we take the higher one and we subtract the lower one, and we end up with a class width of 10. Knowing the class width is very helpful because it allows us to simplify our calculations, because for other components of the frequency table, instead of calculating each one, we can calculate the first one and simply add the class width to it. So the next important piece of the frequency table is the class midpoint. So to obtain the class midpoint for any given class, we take the higher limit in the class, the upper limit, so for the first one we use 59, and we add to it the lower limit for that class, in this case 50, and we divide by 2. And that will give us 109 over 2, which yields 54.5. So this is one of the most important aspects because the midpoint allows us to calculate the mean and standard deviation in our calculators. Finally, the third component that we need to identify and be able to calculate on a frequency table is the class boundaries. And to obtain a class boundary, we find 2 limits that are right next to each other. So in this example, I'm going to do 59 and 60. It's because there's a little space in between them. So what we do is we take 60 and we add 59, and then we want to divide by 2, and that will result in 59.5. So now, since we know how to calculate any given one of these values, we can simply add the class width over and over again until we have all our class midpoints and all our class boundaries. So to find relative frequency for any given class in a frequency table, what we want to do is divide the number of frequencies that occur in that class by the total number of frequencies in the chart and multiply by 100%. So for example, if I wanted to find the relative frequency of the second class, the 60 to 69 class, I would take my frequencies for that, 10, and I would divide by n. Now, in this particular problem, n is the sum of the frequency column, and that happens to be 121. So I would take 10, divide by 121, which gives us 0.0826, which we then multiply by 100, or just move 2 decimal places, and we get 8.26%. So the relative frequency for the 60 to 69 class is 8.2% of the total. To find the cumulative frequency for any given class, what we want to do is add the frequency in that class to all the classes above it. So for example, if I wanted to find the cumulative frequency for the 80 to 89 class, I would take 43 and I would add the previous three frequencies to it, which would give us 4 plus 10 plus 25 plus 43, which yields 82. So the cumulative frequency for the 80 to 89 class is 82. So to calculate the mean and the standard deviation of a frequency table, the first thing we want to do is input the class midpoints and the class frequencies into lists L1 and L2 in our TI calculators, which can be found in the Stat menu and by pressing Edit. So what we should end up with is two lists that look just like this. I've taken two pictures so you can see the top and the bottom. So we should have our midpoints in L1 and our frequencies in L2. So what we want to do next is press Stat, and we want to go right over to Calc. We want to select the first option, which is number 1, var stats. Once we select that and come back out to the home screen, we want to use second L1, the comma key, and then second L2. So we should get a picture that looks something like this. So you should have 1 var stats L1, comma L2. So then we press enter, and we're going to end up with our typical 1 var stat screen, and it's going to look like this. We'll see 1 var stats, x bar, sum x, etc. So x bar is our mean for the frequency table, and Sx is our standard deviation. Finally, as always, there are additional resources for you if you are still having trouble understanding these concepts. Our website is available. There have tip sheets as well as our schedules. The Bedford Math Center is located in Academic Resources in room 214. The Lowell Math Center is located in the Cowan Center, room 406B, and E-Tutoring is available 24/7 at the link provided in the description. Thanks for watching.